welcome to Doors to Hope and Healing, an inside look at foster care and adoption needs in Connecticut. My name is Jacqueline Ford, and I am humbled and honored to have worked for the Department of Children and Families for 25 years, and although I may be familiar with many of the topics I bring to you, I am inviting experts in those fields to share their knowledge. This agency is responsible for protecting children and helping troubled families. Joining me in the studio is Glaister Gopi, a program supervisor with the Department of Children and Families. Glaister will help our viewers understand what the purpose of Careline is in investigating all abuse and neglect reports. Thank you so much for joining me here in the studio. I think it's such an important conversation that we're going to have, because the way that DCF knows about any issues with families or children is if somebody makes that call.
Correct.
So can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Let's start with yourself. How long have you been with DCF?
Well, again, I'm Glaister Gopi. I've been with DCF now a little over 16 years. Currently, I am a program supervisor at the Careline. I've worked in a number of different capacities throughout the years, from case management to investigations to field work and so forth. And at present, I'm at the Careline, overseeing their after-hour program and investigations and the reporting of abuse and neglect issues.
So tell our viewers what the Careline is. We know it's a centralized telephone number, but what is its main purpose?
So the Careline is basically the hub. It's the gateway to DCF. It's the location where all calls, reports concerning abuse and neglect is processed. They come from a variety of sources, local police, hospitals, schools, mandated reporters in the community. And basically, this is where all the reports are taken, the reports are reviewed, and the reports are processed with staff, supervisors, directors, and so forth, and our support networks to determine if it meets the criteria for a case to be accepted for an investigation, and also what is the severity around that call? How should we respond? The time that's put on that case. And that's really it. It really is the heart of the agency.
It certainly is. So the people that are answering the telephone call when, so say someone like myself, I'm not affiliated with DCF, I see something in my neighborhood and I give that call to the Careline. Is somebody who's answering that telephone a trained professional? Absolutely.
We call them screeners. They handle every single phone call that comes in through the Careline. They're all experts in their areas. They're the more seasoned workers that have been in the field themselves with investigation experience and different skill sets. They undergo a series of trainings, ongoing. It's not just a one-time training. It's an ongoing follow-up training every year to deal with a variety of issues, whether it's substance abuse, mental health, domestic violence, all the plethora of issues as to why a report would come into the Careline.
And I can imagine that some of those calls are pretty difficult to hear as well, almost like a dispatcher would be,
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to a dispatcher's 911. You never know what's on the other end.
Right.
It could be a minor complaint. It could be something pretty significant, pretty severe.
So when those calls are generated to the Careline, that heart of the agency, are all cases investigated or assessed?
Well, all the reports, of course, are documented, and once the report is taken, it's assessed as to whether or not it meets the criteria. Per state statute, there's sort of a threshold that has to be met for us to accept a case. Once the report is taken, it's reviewed by the screener, the person that's taking the report, their supervisor, and in some cases, even the director of the Careline herself. Just to give you an idea, roughly the Careline takes about 100,000 calls a year. Wow. Of those calls, maybe half sort of generate a report that says, okay, we need to really take a look at this to assess it. And of those reports, maybe about 50% of those reports are actually accepted. So maybe a third of all the calls that are made, generated report is assigned to a designated area office. DCF is set up where it has 6 different regions. So depending on where the case needs to be assigned, it's assigned to that particular office, and they would go out and investigate. But back to your initial question, no. Not every single call that comes into the Careline generates a report. Some is just informational, whether it's more appropriate for 211, whether it's housing, shelter. There's a number of reasons, but not every single call generates an investigation.
And the telephone calls are tape recorded, correct?
Every single call that comes in through the Careline is tape recorded, yes.
And I know that when people are making that call, you're hoping that they're doing it with the best intention.
Good intentions, correct.
But we know that sometimes anybody can make this call.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes the calls are malicious, and there is a criminal piece to that, where there's a criminal recourse. But for the most part, the majority of the reports are pretty well intended, with the exception of a few.
And when a call is generated and it is accepted for further investigation, is it coded a certain hour time frame, response time? How do you determine the level of severity?
Well, it really depends on the report itself, the contents of the report, the severity of the concerns. Assessing risk is, it's not just the worker that's taking the phone call, assessing the information. It's the worker taking the information, processing the information, having a conversation with the supervisor, and support resources if needed. We at DCF, we use a tool. It's the SDM. The acronym stands for Structured Decision Making, which is a tool that the agency obtained through the CRC, which is Children's Resource Center. And this tool basically helps to sort of assess the information, assess the dynamic of the report, and then guides the worker as well as the supervisor towards one, does it meet the criteria for us to accept it as a report? And two, if it is accepted as a report, what's the response time? We have several different response times. The more pressing, immediate, the imminent concerns are coded as same days, which pretty much the agency has 2 hours to respond. We have to respond within 2 hours to sort of assess the situation. Then for the less severe, but still concerning, you can respond, there's a 24-hour code where the agency has within up to 24 hours to respond and assess the situation. And then for the minor concerns, the least severe, there's a 72-hour response time, which is, again, the agency has up to 72 hours to respond and assess the situation at home. We have a bifurcated track at DCF now where it's there's the traditional intake, the investigation route, but then there's also the assessment route. You probably have heard the term FAR, Family Assessment Response, where while it still has to meet the level for accepting a case through state statutes, there has to be a concern of abuse and neglect. The response is not so much to investigate and substantiate and have sort of a definitive finding, as it is an assessment of the family's needs, the parents, the children, services that we can offer, services that we can connect them to, help them to explore and secure the most appropriate services to sort of, mitigate whatever issues may exist.
And that, so if it's accepted as an investigation or accepted as a FAR, is it still the same protocol in the sense of how long they stay engaged with the family, offering services, closing the case?
They're pretty similar. On the investigation side, we have oversights through the feds, as you're probably aware of that. We have 45 days to complete an investigation. Well, it's the same thing with the FAR also.
Okay.
The difference between the two is that on the FAR side, after the assessment, it's totally voluntary for a family to say, yes, I would like to continue with your services. Yes, I would like to, engage in whatever the recommendation is. And they would move on. On the investigation side, if the department, completes the investigation and they find that, there's some serious concerns here, and the investigation may be complete, but we feel that there's enough evidence to warrant, a continued stay. There needs to be some continuity of support, so we would remain in place. Now, on the far side, if a family says, I don't need your services, thank you, but no thank you, the department still has, an obligation to assess safety and risk and so forth. So if If the department is feeling that, listen, we need to stay involved for additional support, we can track change that to make it become an intake, and then we would be forced to stay involved and see things through until all the issues have been addressed.
So a FAR can actually turn into an investigation?
It can. If during the FAR assessment, everything at DCF is assessment. So there's not just the initial assessment, there's also reassessments. So at any time throughout an investigation, or through the life of the case, as things are being assessed as you move along, if it rises to the level that is serious enough to say we need to intervene and we need to take a more intrusive approach, yes, it can be track change.
So in an investigation in a FAR, does FAR also use the term substantiated or unsubstantiated as well?
FAR cases, we really don't substantiate. There's not really a substantiation or an unsubstantiation. It's more so, again, for the assessment piece to determine what services would be most appropriate in meeting the needs that's been identified. If we feel that there has to be a substantiation moving forward, at that point, we feel, listen, it needs to be track change to become an official investigation so we can move forward.
I see. So when the screener is taking all this information down and the caller has made all their concerns, is there the time that they're consulting, like you mentioned, with the supervisor and the program supervisor about that case, is that immediate, or do they have a window of time that they can talk about that call?
Well, when a call is made to the Careline, it's a process in itself, just taking the information and processing the information. Our workers are very skilled, so they're multitasking. While they're taking the reports, they're doing checks. Sometimes it could require criminal background checks. It could be require looking into our system, Child Protective Services background checks, confirming information, correct spelling of names, date of births, address, affiliation with other cases, whether it's an active case, whether it's a new report. There's a lot that goes on at the Careline with the screener. They're multitasking. They make it look really easy, but it's pretty involved. Yeah,
it sounds that way. So if any of our viewers are watching right now and they really do suspect an abuse or neglect case that they're aware of, what number can they call to make that report?
The number to the Careline is 800-842-2288.
Okay, and for our viewers, what information should they know when they make that call so that the screener could make the best assessment and document the most detailed amount of information?
Well, it's always helpful. I mean, for obvious reasons, the more information you have, the better quality of a report you're going to have, right? So I would say if you have concerns of abuse and neglect, most certainly having the correct names, full names would be great, first and last names, date of birth, or at least an age range of the child, and be specific as to what the concern is. Sometimes we get sort of these general blanketed concerns, but I would say the person that should be making a report is the person that has first-hand knowledge, of an incident, because sometimes second or third-hand information, things get distorted and it loses value along the way. Sure. Timely reporting is very important. When something happens, if you report it immediately, it's fresh, you get all the information. Location, whereabouts, phone numbers, the most information that you have. I mean, you may not have everything, but the most information that you have would allow us to make a better assessment and move along faster.
That's good to know. So as we're talking, we know that the Careline is manned 24 hours. So it's a line that people could call at any day of the week, all day long. Yeah. So tell us about that emergency piece of, when the DCF office closes and somebody makes a report. You had said that you are the program supervisor for the after-hour program. So tell us what the after-hour program is.
So you're absolutely right. It's a 24-hour operation. Just think of it like the police. It's 24 hours, 3 different shifts around the clock. During the day, normal business hours, 8 to 5, the various area offices would respond or handle whatever comes in at that time. If it's in an open case, if it's a new case, we would still process it and assign it accordingly. However, after hours, the Careline is it. We handle, removals, disruptions, runaways, foster homes that disrupt, children that actually come into care for the first time, whether it's through the police, through the hospital, new reports. we process everything. I can't think of anything that we don't process after hours. So any phone call that comes into the Careline after 5 p.m., on a business day and on the weekends, the Careline processes everything. The Careline also has its own set of investigators that investigate matters after hours.
Okay.
Each area office would have their own investigations, their own units, but after hours, things don't stop. We keep moving. So our investigators respond to everything after hours, and they pretty much initiate the investigation.
Okay.
Their job is not to complete the investigation per se, as set by the 45 days. It's to respond immediately. It's to assess the situation. It's to take the necessary steps to maximize safety, and then come up with a safety plan that's best for everyone. Most importantly, the children, before it's assigned to an area office for the more comprehensive assessment.
Okay. So when those calls come in and it's deemed appropriate for one of your investigators to get involved, is it because that's been coded an emergency, a 2-hour response time?
More often, yes, especially during the week. We don't really respond to 72 hours because, of course, the next business day, the area office can respond. We respond to the emergencies during the week, but on the weekends, we respond also to the cases that are coded 24-hour responses.
Okay.
So while it may not be an emergency, it does warrant a timely response.
And those investigators are working out of the Careline centralized unit, or are they in the regional?
Well, they're a unique group. They're like sort of the Navy SEALs of the investigators. So they actually work from home. Their job basically is to sit by the phone and wait for it to ring and to respond at 8 p.m. at night, 1 a.m. in the morning, 3 in the morning. And their office is situated at home. They have their own vehicles, and they respond to cases, as they're assigned across the state.
Tell us about your involvement with the police on investigations. How do police get involved? Especially, we can speak more about the after hours, because I know that in the regional offices they'll collaborate with their local police departments.
So, the police, our relationship is one that is just ongoing. Every day we work together. Sometimes they call us to make reports, and more often we're calling them to sort of escort our investigators out into the field for a number of reasons. There are drug raids, domestic violence incidents, anything that would warrant police response involving a child, we would at some point become involved, and we would sort of collaborate on working that case.
Last segment we had Tammy Sneed on, and she talked to us about human trafficking. And can you talk a little bit about your involvement with? Have you found that your numbers, investigations are on the rise because of this real, true, tragic and epidemic that's happening in our state?
Well, I can't really speak to the data to support that there's been an increase, but what I can say is that because of education, because of training, there's more awareness. I think it's brought to our attention more. I think with mandated trainings and community training, more people are aware that they need to call DCF. So we're getting more calls, yes, about human trafficking, and we have children that are involved with us that have been heavily involved in different situations. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that. She talked a lot with us about that, and we were all more educated after speaking with her. So when the person initiates the call to the Careline and it's investigated, is there any circle back to that caller to let them know the disposition of that case, if anything is happening with that case?
Well, for mandated reporters, we send out letters to everyone, letting them know, listen, they may not know the actual disposition, but they will know, yes, we accepted the report and it will be looked into. Or, no, it was not accepted, and that's the notification.
Okay. So before we close, I want to talk to you about, I understand, because I'm a part of it, we're doing a campaign right now to recruit foster families to be emergency foster care families. And although we can say that much of our removals from homes is emergency-based and it's crisis-oriented, and there's lots of trauma that affects kids that are being taken out of their home, regardless of how horrific that abuse is, it's really an unfortunate situation for children to ever have to leave their families in their own hearts and minds. So we're doing this launch of what we're calling Lighthouse Families. And we're asking those families to be ready after hours, at that 5 o'clock moment until the morning, and then on weekends to take in kids who need just an overnight placement. So tell me how that topic came about and why you felt as a manager of the Careline that was a need that we had.
Well, I mean, historically, finding emergency placements, it's always been a challenge. Our age range from 0 to 18. So I think for obvious reasons, we know it's more challenging finding placements for our adolescent population. So as the program supervisor for the After Hour program, I would find myself, along with my peers, late at night, talking with the supervisor and trying to explore resources to no avail. Having children ride around at 2, 3 in the morning for many, many hours, while we're working, tirelessly behind the scenes trying to secure a placement. And I mean, it's one thing to remove a child from an unsafe situation, but it's just another challenge when a child is dealing with all those emotions, the removal and everything that's happening, and now you're just riding around in a car or you're sitting in an office somewhere. And it was a bit insensitive. So we just thought, why can't we come up with a better system to make that transition, that removal transition, smoother and less traumatic. So, we decided to come up with our own network of foster parents that would be willing to step into that role as an emergency provider. That at 1 in the morning, when we're in need of a home for a 2-year-old or a sibling group, of 3, 5, 7-year-olds, or a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old, would you be willing to come forward to be a resource? And in doing so far, I mean, we're making gains. It's not a lot of homes yet, but we're making some gains.
We have 2.
Yeah, we have 2.
We have 2.
Hopefully, the goal is to have 20.
Yes, that is the goal. So if any of our viewers are watching, we're going to encourage them to call the 188 Kid Hero line.
Kid Hero line, correct.
And the training for the Lighthouse families is going to be the same as our traditional foster care and adoptive families. They'll be trained through our protocol, and all of our regulations are the same. The one difference is that those families will be supported and kind of housed. That list will be central office's list.
Correct.
So if you live in North Haven, you won't be affiliated with the New Haven DCF office.
Correct.
You'll be affiliated with the Careline centralized number.
That is correct. That is correct.
So this is, I think it's great for those people out there who want to be foster parents, but they're not in a position to really raise a child temporarily, and they can open their home for a night or for the weekend to one of our kids. The
great thing about this is, if you decide to come forward as a support resource, you get to basically design, the schedule, whether the date and the time.
Right.
You're not locked into you have to be a provider Monday through Friday.
Right.
You get to decide to say, for working families, like you said, someone may have sort of toyed with the idea of becoming a foster parent, but is not ready to make that full commitment. This is a great opportunity to sort of, get your feet wet to see if this is something you'd be interested in. You can say, I'm only available on weekends. Right. You can say, I'm available on Tuesday and Thursday. You get to decide. Right. And then we would sort of work around that. Great for people with work schedules that change. Absolutely. Where they're not always available on the same night of the week for nurses or, different types of police officers and members of the community. Well, I thank you so much for being here with us today. This was so helpful, and I think that our viewers are going to have a better understanding of what the Careline does, how to initiate that call, and then really what happens behind the scenes, because oftentimes people who call may feel that their complaint landed on deaf ears, and we understand that it hasn't. So thank you. No, thank you for having me. Protecting children is our agency's utmost concern. Our goal is to always keep families together, but when a child can't be safely maintained in their home, we need to make immediate plans to secure a safe place for that child to stay. If you would consider being that safe place, either to foster long-term or be a lighthouse family, we would love to discuss this with you. Please call 1-888-KID-HERO. Now, I'd like to introduce you to a special child who is looking for her forever home. Meet Charlize.
I actually like to do a little bit of everything. I like to sing, I like to dance, I like to play with my friends, I like to go outside, I like to ride bikes. The thing I like about school best is I like that they understand me, I like that they help me, I like that they give me second chances. I like math because there's always a twist in it, and you always get to learn something fun, and I think it just challenges me to do better. The perfect family for me, have a older brother, maybe a little sister, because I just love children. I would want someone to not judge me for my mistakes, but I want them to still love me for who I am. And I'm not gonna pretend to be someone I'm not. I'm just gonna be me. And I hope they just accept me for me. I like pets because they really can get you to a place that a human just wouldn't understand. If I was with a friend and they felt sad, I would give them this advice. And I would say, what's the matter? You shouldn't be down because life is just too short. And it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile. I don't want to act for too much, but just love and affection. So I want basically to have what I never had. I love life, I love learning, I just love everything around me. But I'm not perfect, I'm gonna make mistakes, and I learn from them, so that's what makes me special and unique.